Marcus Hayes stepped through the entrance of the restaurant completely drenched and precisely 5 minutes behind schedule. He could barely catch his breath before losing his position immediately right there in front of countless patrons. Everyone sat frozen in their seats watching the entire scene unfold, and nobody uttered a single word or attempted to step in. Marcus had absolutely no clue that the peculiar stranger he had rescued during the downpour the previous evening was also present. The stranger remained seated quietly in the far corner, observing in silence as every harsh word got thrown in his direction. Then, when that stranger walked through the doors of Riverside Cafe, in just one brief instant, all the cruel remarks the supervisor had launched at Marcus were destined to haunt him for the remainder of his days. However, before we reach that moment, let me share with you how this tale began from the very start. Those apparently insignificant moments that wound up transforming the lives of two individuals permanently. If stories filled with emotion and surprising turns appeal to you, then make sure to subscribe, so you never miss a single part of what happens next. So what precisely occurred during that stormy evening, and why did it bring Marcus to this life-changing moment? The tempest that evening showed absolutely no mercy whatsoever, with raindrops heavy as hammers battering the windshield of the aging Ford truck. Marcus Hayes clutched the wheel with both hands while the sleeves of his white work shirt remained wet from the coffee he had spilled earlier that shift. The wipers moved at maximum speed, making that annoying scraping sound, yet they barely let him see more than a few yards of pavement ahead. It was 11 at night, and Riverside Cafe had stayed open late because a tour bus had pulled in at the final moment. Marcus had waited on them wearing his characteristic warm smile, even though his thoughts kept drifting to his 6-year-old daughter waiting back home with the neighbor lady. Sophie was likely asleep by this hour, but regardless, he had to verify that everything was fine. This week, his wages would be exactly enough to handle the rent, assuming nothing unforeseen happened. Assuming the vehicle did not break down, or assuming Sophie did not fall ill. Too many uncertainties in the existence of a single parent, and Marcus let out a heavy sigh. He rubbed his tired eyes using the back of his hand because 2 years had gone by since that time. 2 years since Rebecca died in that automobile crash, and 2 years of being both father and mother while juggling bills and rocking his little girl to sleep whenever she cried for her mom. Sometimes he questioned whether he was doing enough for her, but all he could do was keep moving forward. The headlights cast their glow ahead, lighting up the rain-soaked oak trees that lined the roadway. The drive home through the Cincinnati outskirts was deserted at this late hour and far too empty. So empty, in fact, that when he spotted something unusual up ahead, his heart started pounding much harder. A sleek black sedan sat crooked along the shoulder, with its hazard lights blinking weakly through the thick veil of falling rain. The hood stood wide open, with thin wisps of smoke drifting upward before vanishing into the frigid wind. Standing next to the car was an elderly gentleman with silver gray hair plastered flat against his head, and his black suit soaked clear through. One hand gripped the side of the vehicle for support, with no umbrella and no assistance. Just an old man staring down at his phone with worry etched across his face beneath the dim sweep of the headlights. Marcus pressed the brakes, and the truck skidded just slightly on the slick road surface. His logical mind whispered warnings that it was late, and Sophie was waiting at home. This was an isolated road, and he did not know who this person was. But then he noticed the man's shoulders shaking and saw his fingers struggling with the phone screen, only to discover no signal in this location. He saw a human being who genuinely required help. Marcus remembered the night Rebecca had her accident and wondered if someone had stopped to help her. Had someone stayed with her during those final minutes, and he would never know an answer. But he knew he wanted to be that person for somebody else, so he pulled over and lowered the window halfway. The smell of wet asphalt and engine oil drifted into the cab as he called out, asking if everything was all right. The The man jerked slightly and turned around, squinting through the water, and on his wrinkled face was a mixture of astonishment and the cautious wariness of someone suddenly seeing light in the darkness. "My car died," he said with his voice trembling just a bit, "and no tow service is picking up, and I think I got lost." Marcus studied him for a brief moment, noticing the suit was expensive but now completely soaked. The polished leather shoes now caked in mud, clearly indicating a successful man. But right now he looked no different from a helpless elderly soul stranded in the storm. Marcus opened the door and told him to get in because another few minutes out there and he would freeze. William Turner stood in the rain staring at the beat-up pickup and the young man inviting him inside. Every life lesson about being cautious around strangers echoed through his mind as he wondered who this man was. Why did he stop, and was this safe? But then a cold gust blew past, making him shiver violently. His wetsuit clung to his skin, and his shoes felt icy with water. His phone still showed no signal, and it had been 45 minutes since the breakdown. Not a single other car had passed, and maybe sometimes people simply had to trust the kindness of strangers. William stepped forward and opened the door, sliding into the passenger seat. Water dripped from his clothes onto the warm leather, leaving dark patches inside. The temperature was warmer thanks to the old heater humming at full power, and William said thank you with his voice still trembling. "You did not have to do this," he added, but Marcus cut in gently, saying nobody lets an old man melt in the rain. "I am Marcus Hayes," he said, and the man replied that his name was William Turner, extending a hand. His hand was ice cold, but the handshake was firm as Marcus pulled the truck back onto the road. Asterisk rain hammered the roof in a steady rhythm, almost hypnotic in the small cabin, as the two strangers sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence where you are not sure what to say, but also do not feel uncomfortable about it. "Where were you heading before the car broke down?" Marcus asked without shifting his eyes from the road. "A meeting out of town that ended later than expected, and then I got caught in the storm." William sighed before adding that he thought he knew a shortcut. Turns out it was the long way around, and Marcus said with a small smile that GPS lies sometimes. They drove through the empty suburban streets where the streetlights flickered weakly, and a few houses still had lights on, but most were dark. This was not a fancy neighborhood, just small apartments and old row houses, but there was a certain warmth in how people lived here. Marcus stopped in front of a 3-story apartment building with faded cream paint and said, "This is my place." There is no hotel nearby at this hour, and it is still pouring out there, so you can stay the night. "I will call a tow service for you in the morning," he offered, and William stared at him surprised. "Are you sure? Because I do not want to be a burden," he asked, but Marcus said firm but kind that he had a good sofa. "Better than you staying in my truck all night," he added. They stepped inside, stomping water off their shoes, and the apartment was small with a combined living room and kitchen, plus 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. But everything was tidy and clean, with photos of a smiling little blonde girl hanging on the wall. On the coffee table were building blocks and picture books and a pink plastic cup. "My daughter Sophie," Marcus explained when he noticed William looking. "She is 6 and she is asleep in the bedroom right now." William nodded as warmth spread through him, because this young man had not just stopped to help a stranger. He had brought that stranger home where his daughter slept, and that was a level of trust William rarely saw in this city. Marcus handed him a towel, saying, "You can use the bathroom first, and I will find some dry clothes for you." When William stepped into the small bathroom, the mirror fogged by steam, he caught sight of himself looking like a drenched old man, appearing pitiful. But in his eyes, he saw something he had not felt in a long time, which was genuine emotion stirred by an act of kindness. 20 minutes later, William sat on the sofa wearing Marcus' oversized athletic clothes. In his hands was a steaming bowl of instant soup, with its aroma filling the small room. Marcus sat on the chair beside him holding his own bowl, but he looked exhausted from the long day. "I truly appreciate this," William said sincerely, because not everyone would do what you just did. Marcus shrugged, saying just doing the right thing, but William said pointedly that not everyone does the right thing, especially these days. They were quiet for a moment, with the rain now softer against the window before. William took a sip of soup and asked what he did for work. Waiter at Riverside Cafe. Marcus replied and added that he had been there 4 years. Not a dream job, but it pays on time and lets me spend time with my daughter, he said. And your wife? William asked, but Marcus fell silent with sadness flickering across his eyes. She passed away 2 years ago in a car accident, and since then it is just me and Sophie. William felt something tighten inside his chest as he said he was very sorry. It is all right, Marcus said, though his voice wavered slightly. We are learning to keep going, and Sophie, she is everything to me. William looked at the young man with his tired face, yet still a light in his eyes. He had lost his wife and raised a child alone and worked tirelessly, yet still stopped to help a stranger in the rain. That was the kind of person William had not seen in a long time in his ruthless business world. And you? Marcus asked, shifting the topic. So what do you do? William hesitated because he was used to introducing himself with titles and companies and achievements, but tonight none of that felt important. I am in business, he said simply, and added that he owned a few companies and had a meeting about a new deal today. Sounds important, Marcus noted, and William nodded, saying it is. But I am starting to realize that sometimes the most important things are not the numbers or the contracts. Marcus smiled faintly, saying that Sophie teaches me that every day. They talked for a while longer, sharing small stories about life and struggles and simple joys. William spoke about how he had been so busy that he forgot what connection felt like. Marcus told him about Sophie learning her first letter and about how she asked why her mom never came home. When the clock struck 1 in the morning, Marcus stood, saying, "You should rest, and I will get you a blanket." Marcus, William called softly and said thank you, not just for helping me, but for reminding me that good people still exist. Marcus nodded with warmth in his eyes, telling him to sleep well, Mr. Turner. When Marcus woke at 5 in the morning, the sky was still dark because he was used to waking early. He needed to prepare breakfast for Sophie before school, then get to the cafe for the morning shift. He tiptoed into the living room, careful not to make noise, but the sofa was empty. The blanket was neatly folded, and on the coffee table a small note lay waiting, written by hand. Marcus, thank you for seeing me as a human being, not a burden or a frightening stranger. Last night you reminded me of values I had nearly forgotten, and I will never forget this kindness, William Turner. Marcus smiled softly and tucked the note into his pocket, not thinking much about whether he would ever see the old man again. It was simply a good deed done, and life would go on. He had no idea that in less than 24 hours, William Turner would walk into Riverside Cafe and everything would change. That morning, everything seemed to go wrong from the moment Marcus opened his eyes. Sophie woke up with a soft cough, and her face was flushed. Marcus placed his hand on her forehead, finding it warm, but not enough to be considered a fever. She insisted on going to school because there was an art test that day, and she had been practicing all week. Dad, I can draw the horse really well now, Sophie said with her eyes sparkling and adding that she could not miss it. Marcus sighed while brushing his daughter's hair and said, all right, but if you feel unwell, you have to tell your teacher, okay? After dropping Sophie off at Mrs. Anderson's house, which belonged to the kind neighbor who helped Marcus watch Sophie every morning before the school bus arrived, Marcus drove back toward the cafe, but that was the day the old Ford decided to turn on him. It sputtered and coughed a few times before dying completely. No, Marcus tapped lightly on the dashboard, saying, do not do this to me today. 15 minutes and countless attempts to restart it. Later, the engine finally turned over. But now Marcus was late, and very late at that. Marcus burst into the cafe at 7 in the morning, which was 10 minutes past his scheduled start time. His shirt was partially damp from the morning drizzle, and his hair disheveled. The door chime rang, and instantly every pair of eyes in the cafe turned toward him. The morning atmosphere at Riverside Cafe was usually noisy with chatter and the sizzle of frying pans and the aroma of toast and freshly brewed coffee. But right now, everything suddenly went silent. Behind the register, Derek Matthews was waiting, and he was the cafe manager at 40 years old. His hair slicked back to a glossy sheen, and his black suit always perfectly pressed. His hard features looked even colder than usual as he called out, Hayes, making sure his voice was loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Do you own a watch?" he asked, and Marcus swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in his voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews, because my car broke down," and Derek cut him off, saying, "I do not care." He stepped out from behind the counter with his black leather shoes clicking against the tiled floor, and each step sounded like a sentence being handed down. "You think your time is more valuable than our customers' time?" Derek asked, and Marcus tried to say, "No, sir," but Derek held out a hand with his voice rising. A few customers at nearby tables turned to look as Derek continued. "You are late, and that is the only fact I need," he said. Marcus felt his face burn as he glanced around the cafe, noticing Brian Sullivan, the cook, standing frozen by the stove, still holding the stirring spoon but not daring to move. Lisa Chun, the morning shift waitress, stood in a corner with her face pale and eyes full of worry but silent. Mr. Matthews Marcus tried to keep his voice calm, saying, "I am truly sorry because last night I helped a man who was stranded in the rain. I brought him home, and this morning my car." "Oh, that is wonderful," Derek sneered, cutting him off. "So you are a hero now, Hayes, and very admirable. But do you know what is not admirable?" he asked. "Abandoning your job for some touching story." Marcus bit his lip, trying to say, "I did not abandon it, and I was only 10 minutes, but Derek interjected, saying that in that time we had 3 tables waiting. Lisa had to serve everyone alone, and where were you playing the Good Samaritan? The customers began exchanging looks, and an older woman sitting at a corner table whispered to her companion, saying, "Poor guy." But no one spoke up as Derek turned back to the counter and grabbed a sheet of paper. "Do you have any idea how important today is, Hayes?" he asked, and Marcus shook his head with a sense of dread building inside him. "Today, the actual owner of Riverside Cafe will be visiting," Derek said with his voice icy. "He has owned this place since last year, but has never come by, and now for the first time he wants to see how the cafe runs. I need everything perfect." Derek emphasized the word, then stepped closer to Marcus. Lowering his voice, though, it was still loud enough for everyone to hear. "And you think I am going to let some chronically late, irresponsible guy like you ruin my first impression on the owner?" he asked. "Mr. Matthews, please give me a chance," Marcus said with his voice almost pleading. 4 years. I have worked here for 4 years, and I have never skipped a shift without notice. I have never complained, and this is the first time The first time is also the last time." Derek cut him off. He pointed to the apron hanging behind the counter, saying, "Take off the apron because you are fired." The words hit like a bolt of lightning as Marcus stood frozen, unable to believe his ears. "You cannot," Derek said. "I can, and I already did," while turning back to the counter. "Hand over the apron, then get out of my cafe," he demanded. Inside the cafe, not a sound could be heard because the sizzling from the pan had stopped. Even the background music seemed to fall silent, leaving only Marcus' heavy breathing and the pounding of his heart in his chest. Marcus untied the apron with his hands trembling, and he laid it on the counter, trying to keep his composure, even as he felt shattered inside. 4 years of hard work and sweat and smiles for customers and extra late-night shifts for a bit more pay, all gone in an instant. "I hope you find another job," Hayes, Derek said with a fake sympathetic tone. "But a word of advice is that next time you should care more about your job than about playing hero." Marcus did not respond as he turned and walked away with each step feeling heavy. As he passed the tables, some customers looked at him with pity, while others quickly looked away. Lisa stood in the corner with eyes brimming with tears, but she did not dare say a word. The door chime rang as Marcus stepped outside into the drizzle that was still falling. Cincinnati Monday morning sky was gray and cold as Marcus stood on the sidewalk, looking back at the cafe through the glass window. He saw Derek laughing and saying something to Brian, looking satisfied as if firing someone made him feel more powerful. Marcus wiped the water from his face, or were those tears, because he was not sure. All he knew was that he had just lost his job and lost his only source of income. And Sophie, what would Sophie eat next week, and how would he pay the rent? He started walking with shoulders slumped, dragging his feet along the wet pavement, completely unaware that across the street a black sedan was parked quietly, and the man inside was watching everything. William Turner's grip tightened on the steering wheel as his teeth clenched because he had seen it all. He had seen how Derek Matthews humiliated Marcus in front of everyone and saw how no one spoke up for him. He saw Marcus walk out like a broken man as William looked up at the sign above the cafe. Riverside Cafe, he murmured with a smile faintly appearing, but it was a cold and determined smile. So this is where you work, and this is how they treat you, he said to himself. He checked his watch, seeing it was 12:30 in the afternoon, which was right on time. William Turner had owned Riverside Cafe for a year, having bought it from the previous owner as a small investment in his vast portfolio. He had never visited the place, leaving management in the hands of Derek Matthews, who was a man with an impressive track record in terms of numbers. But now William realized that numbers were not everything. He dialed a number and said, "Nathan, it is me and I need you at Riverside Cafe immediately. Bring a hidden camera and recording equipment and get ready to investigate a man named Derek Matthews. I want to know everything about him," he instructed before ending the call. He looked back at the cafe, saying to himself that you saved me last night, Marcus. Now it is my turn. And with that, William Turner stepped out of the car and adjusted his tie before walking into Riverside Cafe. The show was about to begin as the door chime rang when William Turner stepped into Riverside Cafe at exactly 12:30 in the afternoon. The midday sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patches of light across the glossy tile floor. The smell of toasted bread and bacon and coffee filled the air as the cafe was fairly crowded at that hour. Lunchtime customers, including office workers and truck drivers and students, sat at their tables chatting animatedly. The clink of plates and bursts of laughter created the lively ambience of a successful eatery. But when William walked in, something shifted. He was not the kind of man who blended into a crowd, being tall with neatly combed silver hair and a charcoal-tailored suit and polished leather shoes. The way he walked carried a quiet confidence that was unshowy yet impossible to overlook. Derek Matthews, who had been checking receipts behind the counter, looked up, and his eyes lit up when he recognized the special guest. He had been notified about Mr. Turner arriving, and Derek hurried over with his smile wide like a manager greeting an important business partner. "Welcome to Riverside Cafe, and what an honor," he said. William gave a small nod, but did not smile as his eyes swept across the cafe, into the kitchen where Brian was flipping pancakes, and toward Lisa serving a table near the window, into each corner as if assessing every detail. "Everything looks clean," William said calmly and busy. "Yes, sir," Derek nodded, enthusiastically saying, "We always maintain the highest standards and efficient and professional with no mistakes." "No mistakes," William repeated, emphasizing the word slightly before adding that it was interesting. Derek did not catch the undertone as he said, "Yes, sir, because I run a tight operation. I do not allow anyone to damage your reputation," he continued. William walked slowly to the counter, running his fingers lightly across the polished chrome surface before saying, "Speaking of that, I heard someone was fired this morning." Derek stiffened but regained his composure, quickly saying, "Ah, yes, Marcus Hayes. He is always late and lacks discipline. I cannot let someone like that ruin the cafe image, especially on the day of your visit." "How late was he?" William asked, still calm, but there was something sharper in his tone. 10 minutes, sir, Derek replied, but in business time is. I know what time is, William cut in with his voice a touch colder. Marcus Hayes, how long has he worked here? He asked. Derek hesitated before saying 4 years, sir. 4 years, William repeated and asked if this was his first time being late. Derek swallowed, saying not exactly, but I mean, maybe there have been a few times. Yes or no? William asked directly while looking him in the eye. All right, maybe this was the first, Derek admitted with his voice trembling slightly. But rules are rules, sir, and I cannot make exceptions. William nodded slowly, then walked around the cafe before stopping at the counter where Brian was preparing a dish. You are the cook? William asked, and the man replied, Yes, sir, my name is Brian Sullivan. He was a big man with a beard and hands scarred from years in the kitchen. Marcus Hayes, do you know him? William asked, and Brian glanced at Derek, then back at William before nodding. Yes, sir, and Marcus he is the best here. Derek jumped in quickly, saying Brian is exaggerating, sir, because Marcus is just. I'm speaking to Brian, William said firmly, and Derek fell silent instantly. Brian swallowed and continued, saying that Marcus never complains and always shows up on time. He treats customers better than anyone and always smiling, even when he is exhausted. This morning was not fair to him. Not fair, Derek snapped with his voice rising as he said, Brian, you had better watch what you. That is enough, William said, not loudly, but with enough weight that Derek shut his mouth at once. He turned toward Lisa, who stood in the corner holding a small notepad. And you, what do you think of Marcus Hayes? He asked. Lisa, the young woman with neatly tied brown hair and red tearful eyes, looked down at the floor. Marcus is the best person I have ever worked with, she said. He taught me everything when I started, and he always shielded me when customers were harsh. Derek tried to intervene, saying, Sir, everything they say is emotional nonsense because numbers matter, and William turned toward him with his stare icy enough to silence him. Call Marcus Hayes back, William said, and Derek's mouth fell open. Sir, he stammered, but William repeated, call Marcus Hayes back right now. But sir, I just fired him, Derek tried to say. And I am asking you to call him back, William repeated with his tone no longer patient. Or do you need me to explain it more clearly? He asked. Derek gulped as sweat began to form on his forehead before saying, Yes, sir. I will call him right away. Marcus was sitting in his truck with his hands trembling around his phone. He had just called Mrs. Anderson, telling her he might pick Sophie up late today because he needed to look for a job urgently. The kind older woman reassured him that it was fine, but Marcus was anything but fine. His mind swirled with images of unpaid bills and an almost empty fridge and Sophie's shoes that were now too small, and he still could not afford to replace. His phone rang, showing an unknown number, and Marcus hesitated, then answered. Marcus Hayes. It was Derek Matthews' voice coming through, but void of arrogance this time. Instead, he sounded anxious. Yes, Marcus replied cautiously. You need to come back to the cafe right now, Derek said. You just fired me, Marcus said with confusion. I know, but something important has come up, Derek blurted. Please come back as fast as you can. What is it? Marcus asked, but Derek said you will know when you get here before hanging up. Marcus stared at his phone, feeling confused, wondering if this was some sick joke, or did Derek want to humiliate him again. But then he remembered Derek's tone, which was not commanding but pleading. Marcus started the truck, thinking he had nothing left to lose anyway. 15 minutes later, he stood at the door of Riverside Cafe, with his heart hammering and his hand gripping the handle. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open as the chime rang. Everyone in the cafe looked up as Marcus walked in, with eyes scanning the room, feeling confused by the tense look on Derek's face. And by the presence of a stranger, but no, wait, not a stranger. It was William Turner, and Marcus froze. The old man from last night and the man he rescued in the storm was now standing there, in a refined suit, carrying himself with total authority. No trace of the helpless elderly man remained, and before Marcus stood a powerful businessman, Marcus Williams smiled lightly and stepped forward, saying, "Thank you for coming back." Mr. Turner, Marcus stammered, asking, "What are you doing here?" William did not answer immediately, and instead he turned to face the entire cafe. His voice rang out clear and firm as he said, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is William Turner, and I am the owner of Riverside Cafe." A wave of whispers rippled through the cafe as customers exchanged surprised looks. Lisa's mouth dropped open, and Brian dropped his spoon in the kitchen, while Marcus felt his head spin. You are the owner," Marcus said, and William nodded, replying, "That is right. And last night you rescued me when I was stranded in the rain. You did not know who I was, and you did not care whether I was rich or poor. You simply saw a human being who needed help," he explained. William turned toward Derek with his eyes icy enough to cut glass, saying, "And this morning you fired that man because he was 10 minutes late after a night spent helping a stranger." Derek's face drained of color as he said, "Sir, I did not know, and if I had known it was you." "If you had known, would you have acted differently?" William asked sharply, adding, "That is precisely the problem, Mr. Matthews. You only respect people with power, not people who deserve respect." Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out, as William stepped beside Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Marcus Hayes, you reminded me of something I nearly forgot in the business world. Selfless kindness and unconditional decency. Therefore, I am making this decision publicly." He turned to the entire cafe, announcing that Marcus Hayes is reinstated immediately. Furthermore, starting today, he is co-manager of Riverside Cafe. The cafe fell silent for a heartbeat. Then from the kitchen, Brian began clapping. Lisa joined in, followed by the customers, as a warm, genuine applause filled the room. Marcus stood there in disbelief, with tears stinging his eyes, and he blinked them back. "Sir, I do not know what to say," he managed, and William smiled, replying, "You do not need to say anything. You did what was right, and I'm just returning the favor." Derek stood frozen and pale as paper before asking, "And what about me, sir?" William looked at him and sighed, saying, "You will remain manager, but from now on you will learn to respect people, not just numbers. And if you ever repeat what you did today," he left the sentence hanging, but the message was unmistakable. Derek bowed his head, saying, "Yes, sir," and with that a new chapter for Riverside Cafe began. 3 weeks had passed since the day William Turner announced that Marcus Hayes was co-manager. Riverside Cafe still opened its doors and still served breakfast and lunch and dinner as usual, but the atmosphere inside was completely different. Marcus was sitting in the small room behind the kitchen, which was the office that previously only Derek was allowed to step into. An old wooden desk and a computer and drawers full of receipts and ledgers. Marcus had never imagined there would be a day he would sit here, not as an employee being called in to be reprimanded, but as someone with the authority to make decisions. But along with that authority came responsibility, and it felt heavier than he had expected. He flipped through each financial report, with his eyes lingering on the columns for revenue and expenses and profit. Something was not right because a few expense items had spiked suddenly over the past 3 months with no clear reason. The cost of supplies was higher than average, and some cash transactions were not fully recorded. Marcus frowned and wrote down the irregularities in a small notebook, thinking it could just be accounting errors, or it could also be something else. Busy Marcus looked up to see Derek Matthews leaning against the doorway with arms crossed and a strained smile on his face. Ever since William's decision, Derek had become different because he no longer shouted and no longer acted like he was above everyone else. Instead, there was a cold, icy silence about him, which was the kind of silence that was more unsettling than anger. "No, I am just looking over some reports," Marcus said, closing the notebook. "Do you need anything?" he asked. "Just wanted to remind you, we have a staff meeting at 3. Derek replied with his tone flat, but his eyes anything but friendly. "William will be joining via video call," he added. "Got it, I know, thanks," Marcus said, but Derek still did not leave right away. He stood there for a few more seconds, looking at Marcus with unreadable eyes, then finally turned and walked off. Marcus watched him go with a vague sense of unease stirring in his chest. That evening, Marcus got home earlier than usual to find Sophie curled up on the sofa coloring in a drawing book, her golden ponytail bouncing to the rhythm of the song she was humming in her head. "Daddy is home." Sophie sprang up and ran over, wrapping herself around his legs. "I missed you so much," she said, and Marcus bent down, lifting his daughter into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of children's shampoo. "I missed you too," he laughed, asking how was school today. "It was great, and I got an A on my art test," Sophie squealed, tugging him over to the fridge. On the door, her drawing was stuck up with a magnet showing a family of 3, which included a dad and a little girl and a faint figure beside them, with the clumsy words, "Mom in Heaven." Marcus' heart clenched because 2 years had passed, but Sophie still thought about her mother every single day. "It is beautiful, honey," Marcus said, forcing his voice to stay steady. Daddy. Sophie suddenly looked straight at him with her clear blue eyes searching. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Why do you ask that?" Marcus replied. "Because you look really tired and you stay up late every night. I hear you sigh a lot," she explained. Marcus sat down and pulled Sophie to sit facing him with their eyes level. "As long as I have you, I am happy, Sophie," he said. "But are you sad?" she asked, and Marcus stayed quiet for a moment, then chose to be honest. "Yes, sometimes I'm sad, but every time I look at you, I feel strong again." Sophie threw her arms around his neck, saying Daddy is the best person in the whole world. In that small apartment, wrapped in the tight hug of a 6-year-old girl, Marcus suddenly felt like the richest man alive. He did not know that at that very moment, out in the parking lot of Riverside Cafe, Derek Matthews was sitting in his car, staring into the cafe through the dark glass. Inside his mind, a shadowy plan was slowly taking shape. On Wednesday morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe early as usual, and he opened the cash register to check the previous night takings. A new habit William had asked both managers to do together so they could compare records. But after counting for a short while, Marcus stopped because money was missing. Exactly $150. He counted again once and twice and 3 times, but the number did not change. The cash in the register did not match the written record. "Is something wrong?" Lisa walked over carrying a tray of coffee cups. She had noticed the tension on his face. "There is money missing," Marcus said quietly, adding it was $150. Lisa frowned, saying maybe someone gave the wrong change last night. Maybe. Marcus nodded, but his unease remained. "Did you notice anything strange last night?" he asked. "No, everything was normal." Lisa tried to recall before adding, "Oh, but Derek stayed late after I left. He said he had to finish some reports." Marcus made a mental note of that because he did not want to jump to conclusions about anyone. "I will check the cameras," he said, softly adding, "For now, do not mention this to anyone." "Okay." Lisa nodded. Marcus went up to the office and turned on the surveillance system because Riverside Cafe had 3 cameras. One on the register, and one in the kitchen, and one at the entrance. He rewound the footage from the previous night, starting around 10 in the evening when the cafe closed. 10:15 in the evening, Lisa and Brian finished cleaning and left one after another. 10:30 only, Derek remained in the cafe. 10:45, Derek stood at the register and opened the till. He pulled out a stack of bills and counted them, then stuffed them straight into his jacket pocket. Marcus paused the video with his heart pounding because Derek was stealing. But Marcus knew one recording was not enough because he needed more evidence. One incident could be brushed off as a mistake, and he needed the full picture. Marcus called William not from the office, but from the parking lot where no one could overhear. "William, I need to talk to you, and it is urgent," he said. On the other end, William's voice was still calm, but clearly focused, asking what is going on. "Marcus, cash is missing, and I have video of Derek taking money from the register," Marcus explained. There was a brief silence. Then William exhaled, slowly asking, "Are you sure?" I watched it 3 times, and it is him, Marcus confirmed. All right, William said, adding, do not do anything yet, and do not confront him, and do not mention this to anyone. I will send someone down. And Marcus. Yes, Marcus replied. Be careful, because if Derek senses you are investigating him, he might do something reckless, William warned. The call ended and Marcus stood in the freezing Cincinnati morning air of the parking lot with a thick fog of unease settling around him. 2 days later, a man walked into Riverside Cafe at 11 in the morning. He was tall with short cropped hair, wearing a black leather jacket and jeans. At first glance, he looked like any other passerby. But the way he watched everything with those sharp, steady eyes and the deliberate movements, and the way he noted every detail, made it clear he was not just a casual customer. He chose a corner table and ordered a cup of coffee and a sandwich. The whole time he quietly observed the way Derek moved around and how he spoke to staff, and how often he touched the cash register. This was Nathan Cross, the private investigator William had hired. William had already told Marcus about him, so Marcus knew. Nathan was there, but no one else in the cafe knew anything, including Derek. Nathan stayed for 2 hours before leaving, but he did not go home that evening. He came back and sat somewhere else with the tiny camera hidden in his jacket, recording every movement and every gesture. On Friday evening, William arranged to meet Marcus at a nearby coffee shop with Nathan there as well. We have got enough, Nathan said, opening his laptop. On the screen were a series of videos and stills showing Derek opening the register and taking money and altering numbers and changing records. Not once, but at least 8 times in the past 3 months. The total amount he has taken is estimated at over $3,000. Nathan concluded. Marcus let out a long breath, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. His salary is not low, so why would he do this, Marcus asked. Not everyone steals because they need money. William shook his head slightly. Some do it out of greed, and some do it for the feeling of power. Derek got used to controlling everything here, and when you became co-manager, he lost part of that control. This is how he tried to take it back, William explained. What do we do now, Marcus asked, and William looked at Nathan and back at Marcus, saying we confront him, but not in private. In front of the whole staff, and I have already called the police. When Marcus asked and William replied Monday morning, I will fly to Cincinnati, and we are going to put an end to this. The weekend passed under a silence stretched tight like a drawn wire. Marcus kept working as usual, forcing himself to act as if nothing had changed, so Derek would not grow suspicious. But every time he saw the man with his fake smile and the way he talked to customers like he owned the place, anger surged up inside him. On Sunday night, Marcus could barely sleep as he lay staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with scenarios, wondering how would Derek react, and would he confess or deny everything and try to pin it back on Marcus. A soft knock on the door pulled him out of his thoughts as Sophie's voice came saying, Dad. Come in, sweetheart, he replied, and she opened the door, clutching her teddy bear while shuffling over to the bed. I cannot sleep, she said, and Marcus lifted the blanket, saying, Come here. Sophie slid in beside him and said, You are worried about work, are not you? Yeah, little, Marcus admitted. Because of your job, she asked, and he replied, Yeah, that too. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, Mom used to say that when you are worried, you just have to look up at the stars and remember, she is up there watching you. Marcus' chest tightened as he said she was right and asked, Is she watching you too? I am sure she is. Marcus gave a sad smile. The two of them lay still like that until Sophie drifted off, still hugging her teddy tightly. Marcus looked at his daughter and whispered softly, Rebecca, do you see this? I am trying to do the right thing for her and for our family. In the darkness, a delicate sense of peace seemed to settle over the room, as if someone were gently placing a hand on his shoulder, saying, Keep going, because it is going to be all right. Monday morning was coming, and with it the moment everything would change. Monday morning, Riverside Cafe. Opened like any other day, with customers coming and going and placing orders and eating breakfast while chatting noisily. No one knew that in just a few hours everything in the cafe would be turned upside down. Marcus arrived at 6:30, which was earlier than usual, and in his pocket was a USB drive containing all the video evidence. William would arrive at 9, and the police had already been notified that they would show up at 9:30. Derek appeared at 7, greeting Marcus perfunctorily, then going straight into the office, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Brian and Lisa arrived afterward, and Brian glanced quickly at Marcus' face, clearly seeing the tension there. "You okay?" Brian asked quietly, and Marcus replied, "I will be adding that today is going to be a long day." At 8:45, William Turner walked into the cafe wearing a neat gray suit with his expression grave and serious. Walking beside him was Nathan Cross holding a briefcase. Derek, who was standing at the counter, jumped when he saw William, saying, "Mr. Turner, I did not know you were coming today." "I did not announce it," William replied with his tone cold. "Marcus, call all the staff out here right now," he instructed. 5 minutes later, the entire Riverside Cafe staff, including Brian and Lisa and 2 part-time employees, had gathered in the service area. The customers in the cafe sensed the heavy atmosphere and gradually stopped eating, turning to watch. William stood in the middle with Marcus beside him, and Derek faced them with his face gradually turning pale. "I am here today to deal with a serious matter," William began. "For the past 3 months, Riverside Cafe has repeatedly lost cash in mysterious ways. At first we thought it was an accounting error, but after investigating we discovered this is not an error." Derek swallowed hard, asking, "Sir, what exactly are you implying?" "I am not implying anything," William said flatly. "I am accusing Derek Matthews of embezzling more than $3,000 in cash from this cafe register over the past 3 months. The air seemed to freeze as Lisa let out a sharp breath, and Brian stood rooted to the spot. Derek stepped back with his face chalk white. "That is slander," Derek shouted, adding, "I would never." Nathan William nodded, and Nathan Cross opened his laptop, turning the screen toward everyone. The video played showing Derek opening the register and pulling out money and stuffing it into his pocket. Then another video, and then another, and everything was clear and sharp and impossible to deny. Sweat rolled down Derek's forehead as he said that is fake, and Marcus staged it to frame me. "Staged it," William repeated with his voice icy. "Then how do you explain your fingerprints on these bills?" He opened a clear evidence bag showing bills that had been marked beforehand. "We marked a number of bills in the register last week, and last night you were the one who took them," William explained. Derek shook his head frantically, saying, "No, that is not what happened." "We also checked your bank statements," Nathan added, saying, "the cash deposits do not match the legal income you reported. You tried to hide it, but not well enough." Derek whipped around to glare at Marcus, with his eyes filled with hatred, saying, "This is all because of you. Before you showed up, I was the only manager here. Then he promotes you some nobody waiter and makes me lose face in front of everyone." "So that means I deserve to have you steal from me?" Marcus asked with his voice calm but pained. "I always respected you, and I never wanted to take your place, but you chose this path yourself." Derek opened his mouth, but no words came out as the door to the cafe opened. 2 police officers stepped inside, and one officer called out Derek Matthews. Derek turned and saw them, and it was as if all the strength drained from his body with his shoulders slumping. "You are under arrest for theft and falsifying financial records," the officer said, taking out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click of the cuffs echoed as they locked around Derek's wrists. He turned his head to look at Marcus one last time, saying, "You think you have won, do not you? You are just some guy who got lucky, and without William, you are nothing." Marcus looked him straight in the eyes, replying, "Maybe that is true, but I do not need power to be a decent human being." "And that you never understood." Derek was led outside, and the door chime rang softly again as it closed behind him, this time for good. Inside the cafe, silence stretched on for a few more breaths. Then Brian was the first to clap. Lisa followed, and a few customers joined in as the applause rose. Not the kind of applause for show, but the kind that belongs to justice. William stepped up beside Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "You did the right thing." Not everyone has the courage to face the truth. "Thank you, William, for everything," Marcus said with his throat tightening. No, William shook his head, saying, "I should be thanking you because you reminded me what truly matters." They shook hands not just as owner and manager, but as friends. As two people standing together on the side of what is right. Spring returned to Cincinnati with cherry blossoms blooming along the banks of the Ohio River and the rows of trees softening into gentler colors. Riverside Cafe was now a far cry from what it had been 6 months earlier, because outside, a new sign had been hung reading "Riverside Cafe, where kindness is served." Inside, the space had been refurbished to be brighter and warmer, with framed photos of staff and customers on the walls. Smiles and everyday moments filled with meaning. Marcus stood behind the counter, no longer wearing the old server uniform, but a simple shirt and neat slacks. His hair was trimmed cleanly, and his eyes no longer held that dull exhaustion. Lisa sat at a corner table doing her homework and occasionally looking up to smile at him. Thanks to William's help, Marcus had been able to send his daughter to a better private school, one where they encouraged and nurtured her artistic talent. Lisa Chun was now the shift lead, training 2 new employees. She was quick and confident and smiled much more than before. Brian was still in the kitchen, but he now had an assistant and was no longer forced to shoulder everything alone like he once did. That evening, William stopped by the cafe, and he sat at his usual table, ordering a cup of coffee and a sandwich as always. Marcus brought the food out himself and sat down across from him. "Revenue is up 40% compared to 6 months ago," Marcus reported. "More regulars are coming back, and we have also gained quite a few new 5-star reviews online." William smiled, saying, "I already know, but what matters more is, are people happy?" Marcus looked around the cafe, seeing Lisa chatting and laughing with customers, and Brian working while whistling in the kitchen. In the corner over there, his daughter Sophie was busy sketching another new picture. "Yes," Marcus said softly, adding, "everyone is much happier than before." "Then that is enough," William replied. They sat in silence for a while, sipping their coffee and listening to the distant sound of the Ohio River flowing gently outside. William Marcus spoke up, saying, "There is something I have always wondered. That night in the rain, did you know I worked at Riverside Cafe?" William shook his head, replying, "No, because back then I only knew you were a good man who stopped his car. The fact that you worked at this cafe was just a beautiful coincidence." "A coincidence?" Marcus smiled, and William replied, "Maybe a bit of both. But I believe this, and when people do something kind, the universe will find a way to bring it back to them." A few weeks later, Marcus stood outside the cafe on a late evening as it was drizzling again. Just like the night he first met William, but this time his heart was no longer weighed down with anxiety. An old car sputtered and died at the side of the road, and an older man stepped out, bewildered, looking around. His phone had no signal, and Marcus did not need long to think. He stepped out from under the awning and walked toward him, asking, "Do you need some help, sir?" The man turned slightly startled, saying, "My car just died, and I do not know what to do." Marcus smiled, saying, "Get in my truck, and I will drive you somewhere safe." As the vehicle rolled forward in the rain, Marcus suddenly remembered William's words that kindness does not need a reason, and it only needs to be done. 6 months later, a short article appeared in the Cincinnati Enquirer with the headline, "A small cafe with a big philosophy as Riverside Cafe becomes a community symbol." Riverside Cafe, located by the Ohio River, is not only a place that serves good food, but also a testament to the power of kindness. Run by Marcus Hayes and William Turner, the cafe has become a place people come to not just to eat, but to feel the warmth of community. When asked about the secret to success, Marcus Hayes simply replied, "We treat people as human beings, not just customers, and that is it." And on another rainy afternoon on another road, someone else stopped their car to help a stranger. The circle of kindness kept on turning as the story of Marcus Hayes and William Turner is not just about a single father being pulled back from the edge. It is a story about how one very small act of kindness can transform an entire life, not only for the person who receives it, but for the one who gives it. In a world that is becoming colder and more hurried, people easily forget that humans still need humans. That kindness is not a sign of weakness, but a mark of strength. Marcus reminded William of the human side behind the numbers, and William gave Marcus a second chance. And together they created a place where kindness is not exploited but honored. That place is Riverside Cafe, and it could also be the story of all of us. If you believe like I do that even one small act of kindness can change the course of a life, then please don't leave in silence. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. If this story touched you, please like the video and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. And before you click away, leave me a comment. Has someone ever helped you on a really bad day? I'll read each and every comment. See you in the next story.